He was just a few meters away from the summit, freezing, alone, slowly dying. More than 40 climbers walked past him that day. Some glanced, some didn't even look. One of them was a Sherpa, highly trained, deeply experienced, and fully capable. He stopped for a moment, looked at the man collapsed in the snow, and then kept walking. His mission was clear: reach the summit. Helping wasn't part of the plan. The man dying in the snow was David Sharp, a British climber who had come to Everest chasing a dream. He came with no team, no Sherpa of his own, and no margin for error. But instead of standing on the summit in triumph, he would become a lifeless figure against the ice, a chilling symbol of what Everest has become. How many people walked past a man as he died, just to say they touched the sky? This story is not about altitude sickness or bad luck. It's about ethics, the raw, uncomfortable kind. It's about how the world's highest mountain becomes a moral void, where human decency is tested by frostbite, fatigue, and ambition. Why didn't anyone help him? Was it too dangerous, or just too inconvenient? Would helping him have meant certain death, or simply delay? And here's the hardest question: what would you have done? Mount Everest doesn't just break bodies, it challenges souls. Up there, with every breath a struggle and every step a decision, humanity is forced into its purest form. Heroism, cowardice, compassion, selfishness, they all walk the same rope. This is the story of David Sharp, a man with a dream, a mountain with no mercy, and the Sherpa who saw him dying and walked away. David Sharp wasn't a millionaire thrill-seeker or a sponsored adventurer. He was a quiet, intelligent man from England, an engineer, a thinker, someone who loved mountains not for glory, but for the personal challenge they offered. He was known as humble, soft-spoken, and intensely independent. He didn't crave attention. He didn't post selfies from summits or chase fame on social media. He believed climbing was something sacred, a battle between your will and the unforgiving elements of nature. David had real experience. He'd summit Cho Oyu, the sixth highest mountain in the world, without supplemental oxygen. He had attempted Everest before, in 2003, but turned back. That failure weighed heavily on him. He wasn't reckless, but he was determined to finish what he'd started. In 2006, he returned to Everest. This time, on his own terms. No guided team, no Sherpa, no backup, just him, his gear, and a deep desire for closure. But that decision, driven by confidence, independence, and perhaps a touch of obsession, left him completely isolated when things began to go wrong. He joined a low-cost expedition run by an Asian trekking agency that provided minimal support. His entire climb cost less than $7,000. That's barely a fraction of the $50,000, $100,000 most climbers spend on a proper attempt. David was going ultralight, ultra-solo, and ultimately, ultra-vulnerable. Friends say he didn't take unnecessary risks. He was methodical, cautious, and mentally strong. But Everest isn't a place that forgives hesitation. And when you're climbing without a partner, a single mistake can echo forever. So why did David come back, knowing the danger? Because Everest wasn't a trophy. It was an unfinished sentence, a promise to himself. And in trying to keep that promise, he walked alone into the most dangerous place on Earth. The final push began like so many summit attempts on Everest, in darkness, cold, and silence. David Sharp left from one of the highest camps on the north side, somewhere near Camp 3 or 4, in the thin, deadly air of the death zone. His goal: reach the top alone, quickly, and descend before his limited oxygen ran out. It was May 14, 2006. The conditions were brutal. Temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Winds sliced through even the best gear. Above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to shut down, organs slowly fail, the brain swells from lack of oxygen, and even simple decisions feel like puzzles. This is the death zone, and David was inside it. Alone. He was carrying just a couple of oxygen bottles, maybe 2, possibly 3. It was enough if things went perfectly. But Everest doesn't allow perfection. Somewhere near 8,500 meters, David stopped moving. Other climbers that day began to notice a man slumped inside a shallow cave, his arms wrapped around his knees, his body frozen in place. That rocky alcove was already infamous. Years earlier, an Indian climber had died there, and his body, green boots and all, remained untouched. Now David Sharp lay right beside him. He was alive, but barely. He was unresponsive, mumbling, not making sense. His oxygen was gone. He couldn't move. Some thought he was already dead. Others hesitated, unsure. But no one stayed. That morning, More than 40 climbers passed by David Sharp. Most kept walking. They had trained for years, spent tens of thousands of dollars, and waited weeks at base camp. The summit was within reach. And the truth? Stopping to help could mean risking their own lives or their only chance at the top. A group led by New Zealander Mark Inglis radioed base camp. They'd seen a man in bad shape near Green Boots Cave. But they didn't stop. They later said they assumed he was beyond saving. Still, someone did stop briefly. A Sherpa named Dawa, hired by another climber, reached David's position later that afternoon. He examined him, spoke to him. David responded faintly. But Dawa quickly realized he couldn't carry him alone. He wasn't equipped for a rescue. He made a choice. He left David in the snow and kept climbing. David Sharp would never leave that cave. He died alone, slowly, at the roof of the world, where the air is thin and the ethics even thinner. His frozen body would become part of the mountain's terrain, visible to every climber who passed, a haunting reminder of the price some pay for their dreams. But the story wasn't over. Because one of the climbers who passed him, one of the few who could have done more, would soon find himself at the center of an ethical firestorm. And the world would ask, when a man is dying in front of you, is reaching the summit still worth it? Dawa was a seasoned Sherpa, strong, experienced, and deeply respected. He had climbed Everest multiple times and knew every crevice, every risk, and every rule written by the mountain. He wasn't just a climber, he was a lifeline for those who came to conquer a peak that doesn't forgive. That day in 2006, Dawa wasn't chasing a personal record. He was working. His role was to guide a paying client to the summit, manage oxygen tanks, carry supplies, and ensure their safety. This is the life of a Sherpa, an elite high-altitude worker who carries the dreams of others, all while risking their own. As he climbed through the death zone, he spotted someone slumped beside Green Boots Cave. It was David Sharp. Dawa stopped. That simple act made him one of the few who did. He knelt beside David. He asked questions. David responded, but barely. He was conscious, but frozen in place. His oxygen was gone. His body was shutting down. He couldn't move, couldn't stand, couldn't walk. Dawa tried to lift him. But he was alone, with no radio, no stretcher, and dwindling oxygen. His client was higher on the mountain, and depending on him. The terrain was narrow, icy, and steep. Staying much longer would have put them both in grave danger. He faced a decision that no one should ever have to make. Try to save someone and risk both of their lives, or continue forward and survive. He walked away. When the world found out, outrage followed. People said he should have done more. Media headlines asked, how could anyone leave a man to die? But those who know Everest know better. Sherpas are not superheroes. They are humans in brutal conditions, carrying lives on their backs every season. Could Dawa have saved David? Maybe, with a team, oxygen, time, and luck. But he had none of those. And Everest waits for no one. Sometimes, being human means living with impossible choices. Sometimes, survival costs you more than your breath. News of David Sharp's death didn't fade quietly into Everest's long list of casualties. It exploded into a global controversy. Headlines around the world condemned the climbers who walked past him. Left to die on Everest, read one. How could they? Asked another. The public wasn't just shocked, they were outraged. People demanded names. They demanded answers. They demanded accountability. At the center of the firestorm was one man, Mark Inglis. Inglis, a double amputee from New Zealand, had just made history by summiting Everest using prosthetic legs. But his remarkable achievement was quickly overshadowed by the revelation that he and his team had passed David Sharp, alive, and kept going. Inglis defended his decision, stating that he genuinely believed David was already dead or unsavable. There was no sign of life, he explained in interviews. Others on his team echoed the same sentiment. But that explanation didn't sit well with everyone. Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to ever summit Everest, responded with quiet fury. He called the incident horrifying and said, if you're not helping someone who's in trouble on the mountain, what kind of achievement is it to reach the top? His words cut through the noise. The mountaineering world erupted into a moral reckoning. Some defended Inglis, arguing that survival in the death zone requires brutal choices. Others believed the event revealed something deeper, that Everest had become more than a mountain. It had become a business, a race, an ego trip, and humanity was being lost in the process. Online forums, climbing communities, and even national parliaments debated the ethics of modern Everest. What are we climbing for? And who are we stepping over to get there? David Sharp didn't just die on Everest. He became a mirror, forcing the world to look at itself, and not like what it saw. Imagine you're there. The wind is howling. Your breath is shallow. Your vision is blurred. You've been climbing for over 12 hours straight. Every step is agony. Every second, your body is failing. And then you see him. A man is sitting in the snow, unmoving. His face is pale, lips cracked, fingers frostbitten. You kneel down. He's alive, but barely. He can't walk. He can barely speak. His eyes are glassy. He doesn't beg for help. He doesn't even speak your language. But he's there, and he needs you. Now ask yourself, what do? You're in the death zone. You have limited oxygen, no stretcher, no rescue team, and hours of descent ahead. You're exhausted, cold, dizzy. Your fingers are numb. Your thoughts are slow. Every breath is a countdown. If you stay, you might not survive. If you leave, he almost certainly won't. This isn't a movie. There's no heroic soundtrack. No cheering crowds. Just wind, snow, pain, and a choice. Would you stay? Would you give him your oxygen? Would you try to carry him down the mountain alone? Would you risk your life for a stranger you'll never see again? Or would you do what most did that day, lower your gaze, and keep climbing? It's easy to say what you'd do when you're warm. At sea level, heroism feels simple. But up there, morality becomes physical. Every act of compassion costs you energy, oxygen, time, maybe even your life. Still, we have to ask. Because if we stop asking, if we stop caring, we lose more than lives. We lose what makes us human. So I'll ask you one last time. No judgment. No assumptions. You're standing above the clouds. You're running out of time. He's right in front of you. No one else is coming. What would you have done? David Sharp reached the summit of Everest. But no one remembers that. What they remember is what came after, the silence, the stairs, the footsteps that passed him by. What they remember is that a man died while dozens walked past him, eyes fixed on the summit, hearts frozen by the pursuit of triumph. In chasing the highest point on Earth, David encountered the lowest point in human behavior. His death wasn't just tragic, it was illuminating. It exposed the dark undercurrent flowing through modern mountaineering. The real danger on Everest isn't just avalanches, frostbite, or thin air. It's indifference. His story forced the world to confront an ugly truth, that the pursuit of glory can dull empathy. That a culture driven by records and recognition can lose sight of responsibility. That sometimes, ambition speaks louder than morality. David died not because the mountain was too cruel, but because the system built around it had forgotten how to care. A system that sells permits without vetting climbers. That values money over experience. That lets people chase a dream without understanding the cost. Years later, David still lies there. In that cave, in the cold, in the conscience of the climbing world. A symbol. A warning. A mirror. Because Everest doesn't just reflect our strength, it reflects our choices. Our courage. Our cruelty. Our silence. So before you dream of standing on top of the world, ask yourself, what would you be willing to sacrifice to get there? Your safety? Your soul? Someone else's life? And if it were you, frozen in place, calling for help in silence, would anyone stop? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, made you think, or made you feel, subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who believes summits should never come at any cost.